recording.
I have done that too. Okay, so we'll go from here. Hello, everyone. I'm Manali Ghosh, the lead coordinator of Sci-ROI India, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the inaugural webinar of the Evolving Trends in Indian STEM series organized by Sci-ROI India. We will be hosting a panel discussion regularly for this series, and we'll be focusing on key issues that are relevant to the progress of the Indian scientific community. Our first topic for this series today is focused on undergraduate research and mentorship in India. Sci-ROI India is a sister program of Sci-ROI Global, that is Science and Research Opportunities in India, and it is a dynamic and upcoming network of STEM professionals in India. It acts as a gateway for young professionals all over the world to effect change and contribute to the knowledge economy in Indian STEM sectors. We are working to develop multiple initiatives that will assist Indian STEM professionals personally and professionally. Our mission includes the following 4 specific areas: mentoring of returning Indian diaspora, undergraduate research, promoting cross-sector collaborations, and scientific discourse. Along with the webinar series that we are going to host today that focuses on evolving trends in Indian STEM sector, the Sci-ROI India team has also been working on formulating and implementing other specific programs. To facilitate cross-sector partnerships, we will launch a collaborative database that will capture the information from all current STEM professionals in India who are independent and would be willing to have potential collaborations with academic, industrial, non-academic, and non-profit partners. If you are a STEM professional currently independently established in India and are interested in such cross-sector interactions, please fill out the Google form through the link my colleague Bhargav is sharing in the chat box currently. To further augment such collaborations, we are also developing the idea around ideation hackathon and tech transfer programs. We'll also be having a mentoring program to help aspiring Indian diaspora who are transitioning back to India and establish a career in STEM. If you have recently transitioned from abroad and have established yourself in an independent STEM career, please consider becoming a mentor for our program. The link is being shared in the chat box as well. We have been working also to develop 2 distinct undergraduate research initiation and summer internship programs, and we will be giving you a brief overview of that at the end of our discussion. And continuing this topic on importance of research and the mentorship for undergraduates in India, I will hand this over to Bhargav now to introduce our panelists today and take the discussion forward.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Bhargav Sanketi. I'm a PhD candidate in cell biology at Cornell University. And welcome to Sci-ROI India's first webinar on undergraduate research and mentorship in India. The main aim of today is to discuss the importance of undergraduate research and mentorship in India from perspectives of various people, which is undergraduates, faculties, educators, administrators, and the government. And our goal is to learn from, obviously, experts in the field of curriculum and program development for undergraduate research in India on how to bridge the gap between theoretical learning and actively performing curiosity-driven scientific activities and experiments. So I'll quickly introduce our panelists and then we can proceed to the panel discussion. First, we have Dr. Pratibha Jolly, who is currently an academic consultant with the NAAC and is a PI on the DST-supported Project Gati, which is Gender Advancement for Transforming Institutions. She previously did transformative work as a principal of Miranda House, a university college for women. We'll be sharing some of her articles describing the pedagogy that she has developed for active learning on our platform soon. We have Professor G. Nagarjuna, who is a science education researcher at the Homi Bhabha Center for Science Education with TIFR, and is mainly interested in knowledge organization and pedagogical approaches to connected learning. We have shared a recorded talk with him in our YouTube channel that you must catch, where he shows us how effective STEM habit formation is for scientific learning. You can check the link in the chat box for that. And finally, we have Dr. Vijay Venugopalan, a former physicist who is a co-founder and managing trustee of Vigyan Shala International, a non-profit that empowers the youth through project-based STEM learning like workshops, makerspaces, etc. A pre-recorded presentation of his will also be uploaded soon. Thank you all for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. So before we begin our discussion, I would request Manali to launch our first poll. This is just for us to get a sense of who is joining us today so that we can kind of tailor our future events accordingly as well, right? So as you all answer these polls, I'm going to tell you what the format of today's discussion is going to be. So we are going to break down this 1 hour into 3 sections. So the first section will be to discuss why do we need to focus on undergraduate research and what the importance of that is. The second one will be what are strategies that work in your experience and what are the current initiatives. And finally, we can go into talking about how different stakeholders in this matter. So how do undergraduates and how do educators, how do administrators, how do they contribute to this this undergraduate research and mentorship? How do they promote this thing? Okay. Wow, we have a very nice breakup of individuals attending. So we have 27% undergrads, 30% postgrads, 22% PhD students, 17% educators and researchers, and 4% others. So it's a very nice mix of people, and hopefully we can get perspectives from different questions. And so please put your questions in the chat box if you have any. We have some pre-prepared questions, but feel free to add your questions and we'll try to have the panelists take them, right? So if the panelists are ready, we can jump into the first question. So the first question is, what do you think an ideal undergraduate education, STEM education should look like? And why is this research initiation really important? Okay, let's start with Dr. Jolly.
Well, thank you. It is very important, and especially for a country like India, that science has to become a lived experience for young students. And the sooner we begin, the better it is. So, this entire lecture lab kind of a dyad doesn't seem to work very well. So early enough, we have to create active learning environments that motivate the student, inspire the student, and introduce, I do think, active learning, because no one can teach anyone anything. We all have to learn and be in charge of our own, let's say, progression in science. So there is a need to break away from rows and rows of desks and benches. And that is one of the first things that I did do, which was that, to create learning studios where students can actually engage with each other. Peer learning takes place, and you're able to integrate hands-on and minds-on activities. But most importantly, right away, my favorite one, the third, is hearts-on. So it's very important that students become inspired every single moment. And it is tough, but if one has an engaged teacher who's committed to creating an active learning environment, then I do think we should be able to start a journey or an adventure into science. And one size does not fit all, there's different strokes for different folks. So as an educator and as an institution, whenever you institutionalize learning, it becomes very important to look at what is every single student's understanding of what the science they're learning is. And that is where the challenge arises. You cannot make it just faceless and, start teaching to an entire class as though everybody is on the same page, because they're not. And so integrate diverse methods of teaching, and personalize instruction as far as possible, even in large systems, despite the constraints. So while it cannot happen for just every single moment, but you can create certain experiences that override the traditional, and they become the defining moments, and they inspire students to begin a journey on their own. I mean, I do think that that is the challenge, and it is not an easy task to do, because you need a critical mass of thinking teachers. So I think you have to look at all the actors, all the players who are in this ecosystem.
Professor GN, did you have anything to add to this?
Okay. So, I mean, Pratibha already said almost everything. Science is done, not read. I think that is something that we need to keep in mind. I mean, when I'm saying science, of course, I'm using the inclusive STEM, which includes engineering as well. So a lot of people think that, engineering, etc., or technology is basically what people do, whereas science is something to do with content. I think I have begun to hate the word content. So much of damage has been done by academies all over the world, not just India. Everywhere, delivery, textbooks, I think have done enormous amount of damage. This is something that we're trying to create a kind of, and that's why, when we call our platform a Chatshala and not a Patshala, it was deliberate. If you have a place where students and teachers are getting together, it is a time for discussion, not for delivery of lectures. And I think we have done that enough. At least right now, the media supports this kind of, converting our academic spaces as chatting spaces, spaces where conversations happen, rather than, delivery of lessons. Delivery of lessons can happen elsewhere. And there is absolutely no depth of good quality lessons on any subject, on any topic, anywhere in the world. But what we really have the dearth of is engagement. Now, the engagement has to be personal, as Pratibha said, like everybody has different questions and their contexts are different. And unless you touch that mind at that right time, when the person gets a question, nothing becomes an engagement. So that has been, I think, one of the main take-home points. In fact, though you guys are actually interested in undergraduate education, I'm a radical. I mean, I would take that primary school onwards. There's no point absolutely to have any lectures. In fact, we have already demonstrated that in one of our pilot projects at our lab. So we gave one laptop per child to primary school students in village. And the textbooks were actually made by the students. From first grade to fourth grade students actually made their own textbooks. So they did literate, they get numerate using that kind of an environment where they actually created contents. You see, that students are the content creators. They're not supposed to be just, absorbing whatever blah, blah, blah we say. So I think, I mean, this is not just for STEM, it's for every subject. For example, in fact, we have to learn a lot from art. What do artists do? So they go to the studio and work. In fact, that is one of the reasons why our platform is called Meta Studio, because we're thinking about studios, not classrooms. I think Pratibha already touched on the reason why learning studios is the term that we need to think about. So, and we have to learn a lot from artists because, artists don't read, they do, they practice. And so is the case with science. Science is a subculture, and therefore it is also an art form. And we have to get back to that kind of a basics and say that, we should not believe that never the two will merge. That approach has to go. Science and art and humanities have to be done together. And that's why the conversational practices that you have in humanities have to get back into science.
That is really, inspiring to hear. And, Vijay, I would love to hear your opinions on this. I would also maybe ask a second additional question here, saying, we have clear ideas from experts as to what works, right? So what do you think are the biggest hurdles in the adoption of these new active learning approaches? Why is there not simply enough of it happening?
Well, I mean, educational, sorry.
No, please
go ahead, Venu. Vijay, please go ahead. I just wanted to say this
no,
whole thing.
Please, you go ahead. Yeah.
The education system is considered to be the most robust for change of all the social systems that we have created. I don't know why, because we are supposed to be learning systems, but the practices that we do in the schools and colleges are so robust. So I think that's one of the important things that we need to break. So just sorry for interrupting Vijay's thing. Please.
No, please. Apologies. So actually, this is something that actually I also wanted to add upon what Pratibha ma'am and GN sir said, because they spoke about on the engagement, active learning, all the points, they are brilliant. So when we came to India and started Vigyanshala, we learned a lot from both of them, to be honest. And when we went on the ground, we also, one factor that we learned is we need to match with the aspirations of the children, of the students. So around 60% or 6 or even 7 out of 10 colleges in India are in rural areas. And the aspirations of the majority over there is not really learning STEM skills for the sake of it, but it is job. And for them to get the connect, that unless you don't get well and really are interested in it and all the active learning, the engagement and all of that, without that you won't really progress. That takes some time and convincing. And that's not only for, so when we talk to people in the government and the education system, like Professor Jian said, that they believe that the education system is very robust. It works very well. It's a very good operational system. It works top to bottom. It's 20,000 crore organization for one small state. So they don't, there's a lot of aversion in actually trying to change the system completely. So what I feel is like what Professor Jian is trying to do. In fact, what Pratibha ma'am has done with Miranda is fantastic. So small changes like that, when you big changes in small units, when you do it, and it really works, then adoption will become faster rather than trying to go centrally. So when success stories like Miranda, when they come out, then a lot of colleges will come and say, okay, then they will agree, right? When the Mirandians are doing much better, that's where adoption will really happen, rather than trying to go a top-down approach. If people like Pratibha ma'am and GN are actually changing labs, and we are trying to do that, and then adoption automatically happens. So the system, there's a lot of inertia, in short. And the inertia is not only in the system, but the inertia is also in the aspirations of students, teachers, and parents, because all the parents have put their life savings in putting the student into undergraduate STEM, especially in engineering, that's in the villages that we have gone. So they are, from the day one, they're job oriented. And a lot of people come to Vigyanshala because you give them an internship certificate, not because you're going to learn something. So that we are trying to change slowly, and that will take time. So when you see the motivated people doing well, like the Mirandans and everyone, then the system will slowly change, and that change is happening. It is happening. It'll take time.
That's really excellent. I think you all already started kind of touching upon it. So let's move on to our second theme, which is what works and what are the current initiatives. So one of the things that we hear a lot of talk about, but we don't really see that much implemented, is the idea of jugaad science or frugal innovations, right? So the idea that cheaply done science can be the way to give research experiences at undergraduate institutions where there are not enough resources available. So what do you think about this idea, and do you have ideas as to how it can be appropriately implemented in a way that institutions can actually run with it? Because there seems to be a lot of hesitation to adapt to these things. Maybe let's start with Vijay this. Maybe let's start with Professor GN this time.
Well, in fact, frugality is, I would say, necessity. It's, let me tell you, I mean, we are at TIFR, right? I mean, possibly a very well-funded organization, at least in India, right? So we really never think of, that we won't do something just because money is not there. But then, we were quite inspired by one of the important maxims of Obaid Siddiqui, the founder of NCBS. We had a chat with him in 2011, just about the time when the program, we were thinking about, what kind of things can we do in undergraduate transformation. So one of the things that he said is become a kind of a sub space, text for us, which is sophistication is required in the mind, not in the lab. And that's a very important thing. Also, the innovations also happen when, you have some kind of deficit around you, and that, of course, a lot of people have talked about it. And to answer, of course, the frugality, let me give an interesting illustration, because right away at this moment, when the pandemic happened, last year in April, labs closed, colleges closed. Then we had this program called CUBE, which is Collaboratively Understanding Biology Education. And then, they didn't have what they usually have in a lab. Like they don't have agar-agar to make a medium. They don't have acids and, all those things that you have in the chemistry department and all that. So what do you do? But then, the need was to actually, for example, to culture fruit fly, Drosophila melanogaster, inside the place, and they are sitting at home. So what do you do? So our undergraduate students actually met that problem. So instead of agar-agar, they actually went and used upma rava, or suji in the north. If you are a South Indian, it is upma rava. If you are in the North India, it is your suji, the one halwa that is made. So they used that as a replacement for agar-agar. And of course, sugar is replaced, sucrose replacement. And since you have to add some kind of preservative, they used vinegar. And then lo and behold, they actually have a complete medium, and they created that medium. They today called it as TSRV medium, tomato, rava, sugar and vinegar medium, and they named it. And now let me tell you, the labs have to learn from these undergraduate students' innovation. And this is an example of a proper replacement of what they couldn't have done. Otherwise they would have had the college labs, and every research lab has all these fancy chemicals. But now the kitchen has become the lab for them. In fact, I would like to make a small advertisement to everybody who is here this Sunday at 11 o'clock IST. There is going to be a Chai and Vai program, and the students of CUBE are actually going to discuss what their innovations are, particularly these frugal labs, how to make your home a lab. I mean, it's possible because of one important reason, because you also asked, like, what is the most important thing to do? I think we have to do project as a context for education, particularly for STEM. So the project-based education, I think, is the key. Yeah, I'll stop with this.
Vijay, I know Vigyanshala, does maker spaces and does all of these things. Where do you think frugal science fits into our curriculum, our pedagogy, etc.?
So the frugal science. So one of the philosophies of Vigyanshala is, of course, like sophistication. So we learned this from GN, and we have taken it from him ever since. Sophistication is required in the mind. End of the day, we need to get things done. So the GTD principle is very key for us. So if we need to have a project and we're going with a certain aim, like the project will have a certain aim and we're going, so project based. So that to how to reach there has multiple ways, right? So to getting things done is key. And most of India is quite poor, to be honest. So the if you go to Indian villages, the salaries are like 6,000, and that's the kind of average that happens there, 6, 7, 8. So spending even money on something like Arduino or Raspberry Pis becomes quite expensive. So to get things done is if that is key for progress, then Jugaad cannot be done without in India because it's a poorer nation. Whereas when we move towards a bit more well-to-do colleges and societies, we do encourage saying the cheaper ways, but if there are more sophisticated ways and they can afford it, so we don't mind that because that gives you a much higher precision and you can do a few more better things. When it is possible, like the KSRT medium, like sir said, GN said, is that one you don't even need to go for expensive ones. So you don't go for the expensive ones for the fancy or the show or for the sake of it. You go and there is utility. You spend more money if there is utility on it. So that's the philosophy that we are going with. And yes, Jugaad is indispensable for a country like India. And there, of course, there are many Indias that are running parallelly. So in many of those Indias, Jugaad has to, there's no other way out. And in few of them, maybe they don't need to do it. But then, yes, they do miss out on the, getting the hands dirty, and, it becomes simple. So when you don't have much to do and you have to reach the same goal, your creativity is really challenged, and you have to sit there and you have to think of 10 ways, right? You don't get things. So uh, we encourage students to go cheap as possible in well-to-do societies, but beyond that, it's fine. And yeah, the Jugaad is important, absolutely, no doubt about that for Indian context.
Yeah, let's actually poll on that. We actually have a poll question to see what our audience thinks about that. So Manali, if you can launch the poll, that would be great. Dr. Jolly, I have another question. You can kind of definitely follow up on what Dr. Vijay and Dr. GN have been talking about. But also I want to kind of take that further and ask, what are other current initiatives, because of the the spaces that you work in, what are other current initiatives that you think that are actually working, right? The things that we should be implementing more at institutions, but we are not yet doing it. What do you think are other important initiatives that we are forgetting?
I just cannot let the opportunity of Jugaad go by without commenting on it, because that's how I started my journey. And, I trained as a theoretician and quantum computation and all that, and I hated the lab when I started teaching. So that's when we, at that moment, had project work as a compulsory component of the curriculum way back in the 80s, So when we began, there was just nothing in the lab. And so there was, with a first project of 50,000 is nothing today, but what we bought lasted us for a decade. And we built everything. We built just everything through student projects and so on. And I could stop at red lights while I was driving to buy a spring toy that stayed with me for 40 years. And it worked for doing spring experiments in the lab, but also bungee jumping later. And, it could be interfaced with computers. So you have to have in your laboratory a box full of trash, a box full of what allows you to make string and sticky tape, the kitchen experiments and so on. So all students need to learn to do back of envelope calculations, as well as then move on to strong analysis and use computers. So, there's a journey that has to take place. And in education, to be able to design something using what is available is an art. And that is something that allows you to create experiments that will be challenging. and you can actually come up with great accuracy with just about nothing. One of my favorite experiments is to get G to a great acceleration to gravity just by dropping a coin. And depending on how you are able to take how many observations, and you have the whole class join in, you can get incredible accuracy. But now so our work has involved a whole lot of this very low cost experiments, which I've described in the articles I've shared with you. But I want to say one thing, that the notion of what is low cost changes over a period of time. So I would say that appropriate use of technology is very important. So we moved from using very simple things and moved naturally to building, data acquisition systems, and forget the cost of the computer for a minute. But then one was able to build comprehensive labs that would have, under 20,000. So when you're making something which is high technology or using appropriate technology, then the cost can come down, because initially you design things very, very differently. Since I wasn't an expert, I was able to come up with electronic circuits which were very innovative and very cost, came down, and we were able to make prototypes for commercialization, and several kits could be made. So the journey of any scientist will involve frugal innovation, but what I call as gradual refinement of processes and introduction of appropriate technology and appropriate sophistication and robustness. So in an undergraduate lab, you don't really need, many times you don't really need a 10 to the power minus 6 accuracy, because you're okay if you're able to produce a result which is up to, say, a first or second significant place. And so you can actually do away with a whole lot of very sophisticated things. So one of the examples I give is one of the great innovators and the person who introduced accurate science way back in 60s was Professor Saraf. Now his work was so finely machined because he was trying to reduce friction if you were looking at a pendulum. But in my work, I love friction, because we're able to, in real-time data acquisition, we want to see a real system. So, well, you might want to reduce it with using a ball bearing on which a pendulum is mounted. But, if you get the displacement time curve, you can then get to data modeling, and you can see how a real system behaves. So over a period of time, your objectives of experimentation also change, and gradual refinement occurs. So on one hand, we have worked with very low cost equipment, and as late as, let's say, 5 years back, one of our innovation projects where students in teams of 10 work was called Eureka My Lab Anytime Anywhere, which was lab in a box. It was just a jugaad kit. And they went to schools to get the young school students excited about science, the demonstrations, and moved on to it. The next project was Mobile My Lab Anytime Anywhere. And so, the amount of money and effort that I invested in Miranda House to get a 1-to-1 ratio of a student to a computing system, no longer do you need it. So now, anywhere I'll stand and say, this is my lab. Everybody today has a phone, and we are not using all the sensors that are out there appropriately enough. And we are therefore moving towards developing comprehensive labs with that. So the notion of what is low cost changes over a period of time, and it must change. So appropriate technology is important. So in my work, we have always started from very simple, frugal innovations, and the context is important. And this also allows you to link up with the social context, and something has to be of use to someone else. And then you don't get hung up about what is the cost or the technology. You do the best that you can at the moment with the things that you have at that point. But naturally, one must graduate on to refining systems And that is a science and an art that's important, because we don't want our students finally to, just say that they are off by a factor of 5 or 10 and say, oh, I have verified a physical phenomena or made a measurement. At the end of the day, they have to be able to appreciate what refinement is all about. But most of the stuff that happens in schools and colleges can be done at far lower cost, because it does not need the kind of sophistication with the kind of results they're producing. Today, you can take the cost of a smart computing machine, computer, or that just, if you say the institution has provided you that, and you don't add the cost of that, but then you can create many other low-cost apps or low-cost other physical systems that can, with great accuracy, then be measured. And that's been our work. So we have balanced, but I always therefore say, use appropriate technology and decide what you want to do. Now, with this said, things have changed a lot, because vocabulary of the country has changed. Educational systems vocabulary has changed. Now, early enough, students are getting opportunities, and even as they move on to undergraduate and to graduate school, institutions today are providing those facilities. And some of the fun is going away, because the fun that I had in building my own lab, building just everything, and then suddenly you come up with money, you can buy multiple copies, you can buy things now off the shelf, which earlier was not available. But then the fun of building things has to be retained. Then you have to get your hands dirty. Teachers have to get their hands dirty, make their own experimental setups, and get the students to be also into product development. And that's how it goes. And today there are very many more opportunities, because you can see that the 3 Academies program for summer internship is there. Students, even as undergraduates, get say from the Bose Fellowship or the Khurana Scholar Award, they can go abroad. And so it's talent in motion. I mean, if I start looking at the trajectory of all my students, Darshana included, Vijay, then it's talent in motion. And the way every student, I mean, I remember how, I have traced each of my students, and it is fantastic. Their journeys have been fantastic. They're all role models. They're all, they're shattering all kinds of stereotypical thinking about what students are. And so let's say that opportunities are there. Institutions are also very aspirational, as the students are. So, I work with the ISEF program, and I see how even the Children's Science Congress, and I see wonderful work students are doing. We look at the Star College scheme of DBT, where now increasingly colleges from rural aspirational districts also are coming, and if you are careful and you're frugal as an institutional head or as a teacher, then even a 1 lakh grant or a 10 lakh grant goes very, very far in producing an excellent STEM environment. And to students, because of Google Sir and the peer information, communication processes, they're getting opportunities. So earlier, only the elitist institutions are all provided opportunities. Not so today, because information about opportunities is percolating and it is being disseminated very fast. And so let us say that the demographics is different. And I should stop here and say that about even in our kind of institutions at Delhi University, 80% students are from outside of Delhi. Many are first generation learners. Many of them are economically marginalized. They have a language problem, but they have made it to these institutions with almost 100 on 100 entry criteria, baseline marks, on their own merit. And they're hugely aspirational, and many of them have never had a lab in their school. So the responsibility of the institution then is to create a bridge course or a remedial course, or bring to every student a set of experiences that can bridge the gaps and I see then that in 3 years, they have an exponential meteoric rise because they want to do the science that they're doing and they are very ready to learn. And so today, I think every stereotypical opinion about students, institutions, their aspiration is being shattered. So we have to be very open-minded and we have to create opportunities which are there. And so today it's easier to come by money, and institutions can raise the funds, they can apply for grants, and there's much more money that is available. What is needed is the will and the path to follow, because otherwise you can just, squander all the advantages that you can get from various government schemes and opportunities.
Professor GN, I see you have your hand raised. Is that on purpose?
Yeah, a minor point I wanted to add to a lot of very interesting stuff that Pratibha has mentioned right now. See, when you are actually working with frugal things, there is one great advantage, and accuracy can also be obtained by repeated observations. This is something that is completely neglected in our undergraduate so-called practical that you do. So you go to the lab for 2 hours, maybe every day. Even that's actually not done all the time, but even if you do that, you actually do one activity this week, and next activity is done next week, and next activity is done some other thing, and you just have no chance to repeat the experiment n number of times. And repeating any observation n number of times, and all of us who work in science labs who know how important that is. And even if you are working with very frugal instruments, n number of observations will actually take you to sophistication, because that's where you apply probability and statistics and actually develop a model of mathematics, because you have a large number of readings. And since Pratibha mentioned pendulum, I got 9.8 exactly. I was actually fooling, right? And I wrote that in the record book as well. But come on, how can you get 9.8 when you are doing it in Andhra Pradesh? Simply not possible. And because you did it only once or twice, it's not possible that, even a scientist would get that kind of thing. So this is, I think, a very important point that is missed out. When our people are actually telling us science, exposing us to the laboratory activity, they're not telling us to, how important reproducibility and repeating an activity n number of times. Not 30. 30 is like a standard sample size in statistics. People say it's not 30. You have to do 300 times, maybe 3,000 times. And that's very, very important. And also, every citizen must repeat it as well.
Yeah. So in fact,
that's repeatability. Repeatability.
In fact, that experiment that has that time taken by a coin to fall, you can get a very a wonderful value for acceleration due to gravity if you get the whole class to do it and do it enough times so that the sample is such that you learn statistics, you learn about errors, you also produce a good result, and it is zero cost, and at the end of it, people can change the points.
And in fact, collaboration was one of your themes, right? So, yes. If the entire class actually does the same activity and collect all the numbers on the blackboard or whiteboard, whatever you have, and actually create that table, and fantastic. That's what you should be doing, instead of, each person doing one activity and not sharing the data with everybody else.
Yeah.
So one
that's
thing
really
that
interesting. Please go, Vijay. Yeah.
One thing that we did, I raised my hands, is because one of the projects we were asking our students to do with the school children is measure the gravity. So we have 2-3 methods, and so we did the experiments in our house over here. So simple, dropping a coin and then rolling a coin on a table with an inclined surface, And you can actually look at the change in the error with the two processes, because the error comes in with your stopwatch or the timing things. That's the
Yeah,
main source.
exactly.
So how we can decrease the error, and with a lot of students doing it, as well as changing the experiment. So just rolling a coin or a ball with an inclined table in a teacher's table, that increases the accuracies to, I think, by 1.5 orders. So that was, I just wanted to share that. That was one of the experiments we asked our students to do. This is cool.
That's really interesting. I actually want, before we move on to the last section, I actually want to take one of the questions from the chat that's kind of interesting. So this is by Praneeth Ramachandra, who asks, do you think that radically changing the entry criteria for colleges would improve the learning outcomes in schools? For example, if JEE was more workshop-based assessment instead of an exam, what do you think of this idea of changing the criteria of how we admit students, and hence also changing how people are learning in their high schools and how people are learning in their primary schools? Maybe start with Pratibha Jolly, ma'am.
So this is a problem of demand and supply. In this in our country, and just look at well, the number of IITs has certainly increased from just being 5 now to but it's still say 10 or 20 of these what you call as elite institutions and so on. And look at the lakhs of students who are aspirational and they want to come into it. And so to have an exam that can be rapidly conducted, to get an experimental component is going to be difficult, as even if you were to ask students for a statement of purpose, nobody will have time to go through it. And you may get a coaching school to write your statement of purpose or teach you some of those things. So it's really a question of demand and supply. So what we need to do is that, but I do agree with the spirit in which the question has been asked, because I do think that marks is a scholastic aptitude cannot be decided by marks. The other thing is that anybody given an opportunity can be trained to do good science. So it's not the fault of a student if they never had a laboratory in their school, and that is the case for majority of our students. So they have seen an experiment being demonstrated or being drawn on a blackboard and so on. So this is something I find even for students who enter Miranda House. And then it is our task to have remedial courses or bridge courses to bring them up, because it's not the students' fault that they did not get that opportunity. So if you were to look at how many students actually do good experimental science in school, that it can become a criteria for an entry into an elite institution or any institution, again, we have to think very hard. So neither are the marks a good measure of their scholastic talent as such, nor would they be hands-on skills a measure. They would be a measure of what opportunity their institution provided circumstantially. So we have to work on standards and benchmarks far more. And what really I do think at this age, what excites me is the inherent motivation of the student, not the level of preparation. Because if you're going to teach to the very best, then why are we teachers? We just have to give this opportunity to everybody who wants to do something. And you'll be surprised. ISRO is one of my best examples. All those who have, and a large number of women, have taken us to Mars or Moon and so on, they're not from the IITs, they're from regional colleges, small places, and so on. But they have used the opportunity of education and hands-on work far better than, let us say, those who come from some of the so-called elite institutions. So the spirit of your question, I agree with. But the ground reality is very, very complex. And for a large country, there are no easy solutions. If we have more institutions, if everybody can come for education, sure, then we can have individual understanding of, everybody can get a chance to study what they want to do.
So can I chip in as well to that question? Because I want to take this opportunity to say something. It's a kind of a tactics, right? So as you say, you just imagine the amount of time that is spent by the school students for preparing for exams like the entrance examinations of various kinds, whether it's medical or engineering or whatever. And then the entrance exam actually becomes, for a large number of people, a motivation to go to school and college, because that's what the parents are driving them towards. And so enormous amount of time and resources are spent on that particular exam. Now, my tactical way of actually making people to think is, if that exam model changed even a little bit, even 20% of that exam changes, just imagine what's going to happen. Every coaching institute across every street in all the urban and suburban areas have to meet that challenge as well. Suppose if you have some 10-20% of practical component, let's say, in all those entrance examinations, what's going to happen? Every coaching institute will have a small lab. They have to, because they have to prepare the students for meeting that challenge. And I can tell you, we are missing an opportunity right there. I keep on telling this to everybody whenever I have this chance to talk to anybody who is part of the JEE policy making body, saying that you are only focusing on two things: conceptual understanding and problem solving. That's it. What about the other habits of STEM? There are a lot of other habits of STEM. Why are you ignoring all those people? And then just imagine you are admitting on those two things for an engineering college, where their aptitude is not actually tested for whether you are actually a hacker, whether you are a cracker, whether you are a person who is actually capable of working with hands. Are you a designer? Are you a design thinker? All those things are completely ignored. So you're not at all. So I agree that since the demand and supply part, which Pratibha talked about, is true, but then, if you really have those components in your examination, then just imagine every street corner coaching club is going to have a studio instead of just, making them to drill on problem solving. So this is the way how I would like to address this problem, saying that, okay, don't worry, just introduce as much of practical component as that in JEE, then all the coaching classes are actually going to transform the country in a year.
Dr. J, I have to cut you off on the interest of time, but that's an excellent point. So just one last quick question, where maybe each of you can take 1 minute to answer this, because we are short on time. But so, we've talked about institutions, we've talked about administrators, we've talked about, how the people in power can bring about the changes. The last question is, so a lot of the people in our audience are themselves, research scholars and PhD students and postdocs and scientists who are going to hopefully be the future educators and research mentors in India. So what is the advice that you have for these people? Like, how do you think they should structure their teaching and research programs in very short words that can actually impact, have a huge impact on the outcome? Maybe let's start with Vijay this time.
Okay. So just add on, I want to add one thing in the last question. So like what Gian said is pretty much happens in a lot of the UK universities. So Cambridge, Oxford has a huge list of tick boxing they do, and of which research methods are one. So you'll see the school students in top places going mad for research projects everywhere, including the coaching and stuff. So regarding this question of what researchers can do, so in short, try to get what they do in real life into the teaching and coaching that they're trying to do. Any it's a teaching program, coaching mentoring program, whatever it be. Because in the end of the day, what you want is to train the students to be geared up for what is there outside. And that helps them in many ways in terms of aspiration of the students and the cultural shock. And there are a lot of these parameters that happen there. So what you do on a day-to-day basis, try to get that into your mentoring coaching programs, as well as always be on the lookout for latest research and teaching learning methods that are there. For example, like experiential learning and active learning, what ma'am was saying, right? So these two things I think should be good enough for you to have a meaningful experience with students.
Dr. Jolly, do you want to take over?
Yes, I feel that, this emanates from when we are, let us say, conducting interviews for recruitment. After, those who get involved in research sometimes forget the fundamentals and the concepts. And, even if you tell them that, be prepared to give some form of how would you go into a classroom and teach, or one single concept, how would you explain that? I find that most of those who have moved into a PhD and so on almost become very narrowly focused, and they forget about the fundamentals and the things. So my advice would be, do stay connected with education outreach programs, contribute to undergraduate teaching very seriously, even go to school sometimes and stay connected. And that is very important, because research, teaching, and extension and outreach work must go hand in hand, because that is the life of an academic. And for PhD students, it would be very engaging. It would also be enriching, because in trying to help someone or mentor someone, our own concepts get cleared. I think I learned my science better when I started teaching. I had to unlearn everything and I had to begin afresh on my own. And this would be something that I do think those of us who want to stay in academics must contribute to outreach programs and do a serious job of it. And that said, let me say education is a gold mine area. It's because there's so many problems there. Anything that you pick up, you can make it into a wonderful research-based engagement for a lifetime. It can become a mission in life. So education is a gold mine area because problems don't stay solved.
Professor Chian, final comments?
All right, so this issue is a very interesting issue. So if you have a lab, for all those people who have a lab, and if you are a scientist and you have access to a space, whatever it is, I would say take as many interns as possible. It could be a school student, it could be an undergraduate student, it could be anybody. Just don't select them. Open your lab a little more. Don't say that, my lab is closed to anybody outside the space. Just keep your lab open. Keep it perforated, if not completely open. Admit as many interns as possible, including school students. In fact, sometimes when you start communicating with the school student, you actually get into a very difficult terrain because you don't know how to answer those questions. And that is when you realize your own shortcomings as a scientist as well, because that's the time when you actually begin to. So a lot of people do a lot of outreach programs, a lot of labs do that, but I can tell you they're just telling whatever they have already thought about. They're not actually speaking to people who have different contexts, different questions. And that you can get, when you start interacting with people at large. So open your lab, not just on the science day, open it every week if possible, or every day if possible. And that will automatically transform your lab into a wonderful community space.
Okay, that was amazing. Thank you all so much for really insightful and profound discussion. I would like to now hand it back over to Manali before we conclude.
Thank you, Bhargav, first of all, for excellently moderating the session. And then I would like to thank our experts and panelists for being so gracious with your time and for joining this discussion. As we all agree on this point that this is a very important topic and we should keep on discussing about this. And 1 hour is nothing, right? To discuss all the important points, but I hope this got our audience started in thinking about some of the policies, some of the reformations you have talked about today, and take it from there. And if possible, we would ask our panelists if our audience would like to engage with you in some or the other form. If they can do that, please feel free to share your information in the chat box. With that, I just wanted to mention something that Sci-ROI India is also trying to do on our end. We are also highly committed towards the undergraduate research, and we are working to launch a 6-month virtual mentorship program aimed to enable undergraduate students to develop passion towards scientific research careers. And this is mostly a research initiation program, and this is focused to serve undergraduate students coming from universities or institutes with limited research opportunities. As mentors, we are aiming to have senior PhDs and postdoctoral students from India. We are in the planning phase, and we would like to have opinions from the experts in the field and also from our audience. And we'll have more information as we go on planning, and please do keep an eye out on our social media platforms. Do write to us on our email ID. And we'll love to engage with you. We'll be having more such webinar series and other initiatives that we talked about in the beginning. So please do keep in engagement with us. And with this, I'll just mention one final thing that Sci-ROI Global team has started. So we have an annual event every year where we showcase the science and research opportunities in India. That's the mission of Sci-ROI. And this year also, we are going virtual with our 6th annual event. And it's going to happen between September 25th and October 3rd. Our registrations have already started, so please do visit our website, which Bhargav is putting in the chat, to register for this event. We will have a lot of things going on, keynote and plenary talks, pre-recorded talks, panel discussions like this one today, breakout rooms where you can more actively engage with the panelists, and active networking throughout the week on our virtual event platform. And we will be covering a lot of fields. We will be looking into funding opportunities, the research ecosystem, as well as the teaching ecosystem in India, academic institutes, non-traditional careers, the industry landscape, as well as the Make in India initiative or the entrepreneurship part. So please do check out our website for more information and register if you feel you are interested in learning more about what's happening currently in the STEM ecosystem in India. And with this, I would like to conclude our session today. Once again, thank you to our panelists for joining us. Thank you to our audience for giving us your time. We really appreciate that. And we wish all of you a good day from here. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Manali. Thank you, Bhargav. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay.
Thank you all so much for coming. This was really good. Great.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.